The gate opens. A man is pushed into the sand. He has no weapon. Across from him, a lion waits, hungry, restless. The animal charges. The crowd leaps to their feet as blood covers the ground. This was not war. This was not punishment. This was a show. In Rome, people came to watch death. Criminals burned alive, prisoners thrown to wild animals, gladiators fighting until the sand turned red. Even fake sea battles with real ships staged in flooded arenas. The crowd cheered. But the games were never just games. They were power. Every scream, every drop of blood reminded the people who ruled their lives. The emperors gave them bread to eat and death to watch, and in return they kept their silence. This is why the arena mattered. This is why emperors spent fortunes to fill it with blood. And this is the story of Rome's most brutal games, where entertainment, politics, and death became one. And to understand it, we need to step inside the arena itself. The gates of the Colosseum open at dawn. Crowds pour through the streets of Rome, flowing toward the giant stone arena. Fathers hold their children's hands. Vendors sell bread, wine, and fruit. 50,000 people are coming, not for prayer, not for politics, but for blood. The Colosseum was more than a building. It was the beating heart of Roman entertainment, a place where emperors could impress the people, and where the people could forget their daily struggles. Entry was free. Food was sometimes free, but the real prize was the spectacle. The morning shows began with animals. Hunters entered the arena, armed with spears and swords. Gates opened and out came lions, leopards, bears, even elephants brought from Africa. The crowd roared as men and beasts fought to the death. Sometimes the hunter won, sometimes the animal. The audience enjoyed both. By midday, the mood shifted. This was the time for executions. Criminals, prisoners, and slaves were dragged into the sand. Some were burned alive. Others were tied to stakes and torn apart by wild animals. At times, they were forced to act out famous myths. A man with wax wings was pushed from a tower to die like Icarus. Another, dressed as Hercules, was burned alive as the crowd laughed and cheered. And then came the moment everyone waited for: the gladiators. They marched into the arena in pairs or in groups. Shields raised, swords drawn, armor shining in the sun. The crowd watched as steel clashed against steel. When a gladiator fell, the audience roared, calling for life or death. The emperor gave the final signal, mercy or the kill. Either way, the crowd cheered. From sunrise to sunset, this was the Roman day at the games. Animals in the morning, executions at noon, gladiators at night. A full day of death, sold as entertainment. And now imagine, the morning sun blazes down on the arena. The gates creak open and the roar of the crowd grows louder. From the darkness, a lion bursts into the sand. Its mane shakes. Its jaws drip with foam. Across from it, a man waits with only a spear. The crowd holds its breath. Then the lion charges. This was the venatio, the beast hunt. It was one of Rome's favorite spectacles. Rome brought animals from every corner of the empire. Lions from North Africa, leopards from the Middle East, tigers from India, bears and wolves from the forests of Europe, even crocodiles and hippos from the Nile. To Romans, these creatures were a symbol of power. To kill them in the arena proved Rome ruled not just people but nature itself. But the truth was uglier. The animals suffered before they ever reached the sand. They were trapped, starved, and beaten during transport. By the time they entered the arena, they were weak, enraged, and terrified. Sometimes trained hunters called bestiari faced the beasts with spears and swords. Skilled fighters could kill dozens of animals in a single show, and the audience loved their courage. But not every fight was fair. At times, unarmed prisoners were thrown to lions or boars, torn apart while the audience cheered. The scale of slaughter was staggering. Julius Caesar once staged games where 500 lions were killed in a single day. Emperor Trajan's victory celebrations lasted 123 days, during which more than 11,000 animals were slaughtered for entertainment. For Rome, the arena became a menagerie of death. Exotic animals that people had only heard of, rhinos, ostriches, even giraffes, were dragged into the Colosseum and killed before the eyes of the crowd. Some were set against each other, a bear chained to a bull or a lion forced to fight a tiger. To Romans, it was a wonder of the empire. To us, it is unthinkable cruelty. But in Rome, this was only the morning show. The day was just beginning. Now the morning's hunts are over. The sand is red with blood, but the crowd is not done. They wait for noon. The executions. This was the darkest part of the games. Death, staged as theater. Criminals, prisoners of war, and slaves were brought into the arena. They were not fighters. They had no weapons. They were there only to die and to amuse the people while doing it. Some were burned alive, tied to wooden posts, surrounded by pitch and dry brush, set aflame as the crowd cheered. Others were crucified, their bodies left hanging in the blazing sun. And many were thrown to animals. A hungry lion, a pack of dogs, even a wild boar. The Romans called this damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to the beasts. But Rome went further. These executions were turned into plays, myth and punishment twisted together. A man was dressed with wings tied to a frame and thrown from a tower. He died as Icarus. Another wore the costume of Hercules, trapped in chains before being burned alive. The story of the hero became the death of a slave. For the Romans, this was entertainment. It was a way to fill the hours between animal hunts and gladiator battles. But for emperors, it was also political. Public execution sent a message. This is the power of Rome. This is what happens when you defy the law or the emperor. Even the victims were chosen carefully. Criminals, rebels, deserters, or prisoners of war. Their suffering was a warning to the crowd, and the crowd loved it. To us, it is shocking cruelty. But to Rome, it was a spectacle. At noon, under the burning sun, the arena became a stage of death, and when the last body fell, the crowd clapped their hands, hungry for the next act. As the sun begins to sink, the crowd is waiting for the main event. The gladiators, the gates open, and they march into the arena, shields raised, helmets shining, swords and spears ready. The crowd explodes with cheers. This is what they came for. Gladiators were not ordinary men. Most were slaves, criminals, or prisoners of war. But some chose life, chasing fame and fortune in the arena. Trained in special schools, they lived harsh lives, disciplined, beaten, and drilled day after day. They ate thick barley porridge to build muscle. They learned how to fight, but also how to entertain, because the arena was not only about winning, it was about putting on a show. The fights were brutal. Steel clashed against steel. Blood splashed across the sand. A man fell gasping as the crowd roared, yet not every match ended in death. Gladiators were expensive to train, and their owners wanted to keep them alive for another fight. Still, death was never far away. When a fighter was badly wounded, the crowd shouted for a decision. Should he live or should he die? All eyes turned to the emperor. With a simple hand gesture, he gave the verdict: mercy or the kill, and the arena obeyed. Some emperors loved the games more than the people themselves. Commodus, the mad emperor, fought in the arena hundreds of times. Armed with a sword or a bow, he killed men and animals while the crowd was forced to cheer. For him, the Colosseum was not politics. It was his playground. But for Rome, gladiators were more than entertainment. They were symbols. They showed Roman courage, discipline, and power. To fight bravely, to face death without fear, this was the Roman ideal. The crowd could forget their hunger, their poverty, their problems. For a few hours, they lived through the gladiators. They cheered. They jeered. They decided life and death. And as the sun set, the arena floor was covered in bodies. The people went home satisfied. For tomorrow there will be more games, but sometimes Rome demanded more than routine. Sometimes the arena became something no one had ever seen before. Now as we move on to the fresh day, the crowd enters the Colosseum expecting blood. But today the arena looks different. The sand is gone. In its place, water. The arena has been flooded. The gates open and ships slide into the basin. Real ships. Oarsmen row. Warriors stand on deck, armed with swords, shields, and spears. The crowd gasps. They are about to witness a sea battle, right in the heart of Rome. This was the Naumachia, the staged naval battle. It was one of the rarest, most expensive, and most spectacular forms of Roman entertainment. The tradition began before the Colosseum. Julius Caesar staged the first great Naumachia in 46 BCE, filling a basin with water and forcing thousands of men to fight a fake sea war. Augustus later built a massive lake near Rome just for these battles. When the Colosseum was built, its engineers designed a system to flood the arena floor. On special occasions, the amphitheater transformed from a battlefield of sand into a theater of water. The battles themselves were deadly. Prisoners of war, criminals, and slaves were forced to play the roles of sailors and soldiers. Some reenacted famous Roman victories, others fought in made-up scenarios, but the end was always the same: blood in the water. Before the fighting began, the men on the ships would raise their weapons and salute the emperor with words that still echo through history. Ave Caesar, moritur te salutant. Hail Caesar, those who are about to die salute you. For the crowd, it was thrilling. They saw ships collide, men drowning, warriors cut down on floating decks. The water turned red as bodies sank beneath the surface. For the victims, it was a death sentence. Few survived a naumachia. Staging such a battle was massively expensive. The ships had to be built, the water channeled in, and thousands of men sacrificed. That is why naumachii were rare. But when they happened, they became legends. To Romans, it was proof of their empire's wealth and power. To us, it is one of the most chilling reminders of how far Rome would go to turn death into spectacle. And that was the true secret of the games. They were never just about sport or cruelty. They were about control. Every drop of blood in the arena was also a message from the emperor to his people. To Romans, it was proof of their empire's wealth and power. To us, it is one of the most chilling reminders of how far Rome would go to turn death into spectacle. But behind the wonder, there was calculation. These games were not just for thrills or tradition, they were weapons of control. The Colosseum was not built only for fun. It was built for power. 50,000 people filled its seats, rich and poor, senators and slaves, all watching the same spectacle. For a few hours, they forgot their hunger, their debts, their anger. That was the point. The poet Juvenal said it best. The Roman people cared only for bread and circuses, free food to fill their stomachs, free shows to fill their minds. And the emperors knew it. The games were not for charity. They were propaganda. Every detail sent a message. Gladiators fighting bravely showed Roman courage. Lions torn down by hunters proved Rome's dominance over nature. When an emperor spared a defeated fighter, it showed his mercy. When he ordered death, it showed his absolute power. The arena was a stage, and the emperor was always the star. His face appeared in statues, in banners, in the cheers of the crowd. When thousands roared together, it was not just for the fight. It was for the man who gave them the show. The games also bought loyalty. 100 days of spectacles like those held when the Colosseum first opened drowned Rome in blood and excitement. Thousands of men and animals died, but the people left satisfied. No talk of rebellion, no talk of hunger, just applause. Politicians used the same trick. Pay for gladiators, fund a beast hunt, and you won the cheers of the crowd and their votes. In Rome, popularity was currency and the arena was the bank, but the people were not always predictable. A crowd could cheer, but it could also boo. They could demand lower grain prices, shout against a senator, even riot. The same arena that pacified the people could also give them power. Still, for centuries, bread and circuses worked. The empire survived one crisis after another, while its citizens sat in the stands, distracted by the spectacle. The sand ran red, but the throne stayed safe. The arena was not just entertainment. It was the emperor's most powerful weapon. For centuries, the arena was Rome's beating heart, but nothing lasts forever. By the 4th century AD, the empire was changing. Money grew tight. The cost of games, armies of gladiators, exotic animals shipped from Africa and Asia, became too heavy for an empire already stretched thin. Religion also played its part. As Christianity spread, the brutal spectacles clashed with new values. Leaders of the church spoke against the games, calling them cruel and sinful. Some emperors still tried to keep the tradition alive, but the mood of the people was shifting. The last recorded gladiator fight was in the early 5th century. The last beast hunts lingered a little longer, but eventually even those disappeared. The Colosseum itself, once the jewel of Rome, fell into ruin, its stones stolen, its arena silent. What had once been the greatest show on earth became a ghost of the past. The sand dried. The crowds vanished. The empire itself crumbled. The arena was dead. But its memory of blood, power, and spectacle survived, and that memory still lives with us. The roar of the crowd has long since faded. The Colosseum stands in ruins, its stones weathered by time, its arena silent. But if you walk through its arches today, you can still imagine it. The screams, the clash of steel, the roar of lions. For the Romans, these games were more than entertainment. They were a mirror of their world, cruel, powerful, spectacular. Every drop of blood was a reminder of Rome's might. Every spectacle was a message from the emperor: obey or be crushed. And yet the arena was also fragile. Built on suffering, it collapsed as the empire changed. What once united millions became unthinkable. The greatest show on earth vanished, leaving behind only stories carved in stone. Today we look back with shock. But perhaps that is the lesson. Rome's power did not come from its armies alone. It came from the illusions it fed its people. Bread and circuses kept an empire alive. Until they couldn't. The arena may be silent, but its legacy is not. It reminds us how far humans will go for power, and how far they'll go for spectacle. If you found this journey into Rome's most brutal traditions fascinating, make sure to subscribe for more untold stories of the empire. Drop a comment: would you have survived the Roman arena? And don't forget to like the video, it helps us bring history back to life. This was Rome. Brutal, bloody, eternal.